Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well. This Sunday, October 2023, we are going to make a specific video on the exchanges and mainly the exchanges as being a crucial element in the next bull run. In any case, the end of this bear market, the end of this lethargy, because this is more or less the last autogenic element in which one could be afraid having a new FTX. Could this happen or not with all the fire that is going on around Binance? How it is happening, what is happening on Bybit too. We're going to come back to all of that. We're going to come back to their crypto each time, and then we're going to talk about the different exchanges, exactly what's happening, and it starts right away. As a reminder, you always have the possibility of having free access to the educational course, which is a 60-hour training course worth €400, which allows you to learn blockchain, crypto, investment, technical analysis, trading, everything to become profitable. Through 130 videos, 400 pages of guides, quizzes to find out where you are in your progress, and all for free. To have access to this lifelong training, simply use the platform of one of our partners. Everything is explained in the comments and descriptions. And we attack immediately with Binance for several reasons. One, because Binance is the trigger that had last year on FTX. It is because of this aid that the FTX affair really broke out and in which we really had the FTX apocalypse. And following that, there is the CEO of Kraken, if I'm not talking nonsense, who explained that FTX was not the only one to be more or less average in terms of its funds. And there was a whole controversy that took place. Was Binance in default or not? We talked about it less and less until we forgot about it. Except that Binance is attacked from all sides, particularly in the U.S. The CEO of Binance US has left, and overall there is a whole series of investigations being carried out, whether on money laundering, asset management of users, whether it is the non-regulation of Binance US in the U.S. So we still have a big force which is in the process of set up to try to limit Binance. So on the other hand, it's a bit normal because we have players like Fidelity who are trying to release a platform specializing in crypto exchanges that would be pure US. We have other players specific to the USA and even to the world of traditional finance who are arriving in the economic world. So it's logical at the same time, okay? Except that it continues to get worse. Overall, we had the departure of the director of Binance, France. As a reminder, Binance defined that in France it was their place to attack Europe. This was really the crucial point for attacking Europe. And there, we still have someone who is important because, in addition, she is a former member of the AMF who left, and she left of her own accord. And that's important to note. We don't know in what case or how, but it's a big departure that hurt a lot. Very bad, especially since we recently learned that in this case there will no longer be a Binance credit card for all European users. And we can even see that there was still a lot of trouble to have a new operator to manage the basic euros on Binance, and therefore we still ask ourselves a lot of questions, especially since behind all this, we have news that we have indeed had withdrawal peaks since the various announcements. The director's announcement, the announcement of the difficulties in accessing these euros, it really hurts. That is to say that there are people who were stuck with money that they could neither withdraw nor transform USDT into euros. So it was very complicated. And now the credit card. So here we really ask ourselves questions. Will Binance actually stay in Europe? Quite simply, will they be able to make the necessary effort to come into compliance and be able to carry out these different actions? On European territory, namely that we have MiCA, which is in the process of being put in place, we do not only have MiCA, we also have DCAA 8, which is the new regulation which will seriously hurt exchanges in which overall, to make it really very simple and schematized, they will have to direct absolutely all exchanges from the first euro or the first dollar. So it will really hurt, and it requires a lot of infrastructure to be able to do it. And so we really ask ourselves questions on Binance, especially since the US part is disappearing, the European part too. What will still be the volume represented by Binance? Binance had an expansion curve that was really impressive in 2021 and 2022, in which they were able to absorb a lot of volume, and above all, they hired a lot of people. There was a first wave of layoffs which took place recently. And I think we are going to see a second one coming, or even a third, because if there is no bull run quickly, they have increased perhaps too quickly, and that is perhaps what we risk seeing, a restructuring of fees. And there the question we ask ourselves is whether they will be able, if ever there is a bank run, to assume this bank run. Do we find ourselves in an FTX, like in which instead of the role of FTT, we have the BNB that we see here because we know that there is a large part of Binance's reserves which are made in Binance Kong. Okay, so in BNB on this, we are going to have a really important role. That's why I told you that the level of $200 was really very important, because if he ever gives in, it implies that there we are going very low. We are going to look for the 52. We have nothing left there. We have imbalance. We have zero volume. We are going to sink even if we have a small area at the 120 level. But I think we'll just make a stop and go. Look very low. And we see that we are really having a lot of trouble holding on despite the fact that we are still the world leader. Yes, that there are difficulties currently, but we are resisting. We are in a form of low lethargy on a $100 fight. If we ever have a BTC that stalls, if we ever have a general macro that stalls and a decrease in volumes and an increase in legal pressure on Binance, what will happen? What's going to happen? Will the 200 be held? Are we not in this key level which was bought by FTX at the time on its FTT? There you go. These are questions that we need to ask ourselves because overall this is the last risk that we have, the last black swan that we could have. It would be a crisis linked to exchanges. Once again, Binance, Bybit, Bybit. We discuss it afterwards because it's something else again, but it's also scary in general. Regulation in Europe is going to be complicated. Certainly more complicated than that in the USA. And this is one of the reasons why Bybit is leaving the UK, is leaving France generally, or even further afield, because it is currently banned for French people to register on Bybit. I think there is a good chance that French people registered on Bybit will soon see their accounts closed shortly. I think by the end of the year 2024. Is this for compliance? It's possible, but I think it's quite unlikely given Mika's face, given DC8. What is happening is that people are saying to themselves, is this market really worth it? Wouldn't we withdraw completely? And we would perhaps come in with another type of product to achieve compliance, but we would not offer all the services. Something that could be feasible and that we find among certain other actors. So for me, we are still in difficulty with the European market and a difficulty linked to Binance. So on this, I will be very clear with you. Does Binance have a risk? Yes, Binance has a risk because we remember that it is a centralized exchange, so we have no visibility on the capacity to really be able to secure the funds. Knowing that we are in a field which is even more complicated. To audit, which is the field of crypto, it is not for nothing that the biggest audit centers have backed down, and it is not possible. Binance cannot find people to audit its accounts. Reserve. And so finally, when I say someone, that is to say a large firm which is well established in the street in which we have the necessary insurance to be able to cover. If ever there is a defect, they cannot find these people there, okay? Because it's complex, because it's difficult, and above all, it's subject to manipulation, and it's really very, very complicated in that regard. So we have communication from CZ, which is still very strong. We recall that it is someone who has communication around the number 4, and the notion of SAFU, to show that there is no risk at the level of Binance. But that does not prevent the fact that at the moment, we have no certainty on this side, and that we should not process the exchanges, centralized as traveling banks. It's really very important. On the Discord, I had a discussion in the premium part with one of the members where I explained to him that it is very important to take into consideration that centralized exchanges are not banks. They are not insured like banks. There is no certainty, no structural regulation. When we see that the already basic banks are doing a lot of stupid things while they are regulated non-stop, when will we be able to have the same thing at the level of centralized exchanges? Not immediately. So we use them for their usefulness. We do what needs to be done on them. And then we either go to a hot wallet like Rabbit or MetaMask, or we go to a cold wallet like Ledger, for example. Or even if we don't want to go with this typology, I remind you that there are wallets which are what we call MPC, in which we do a KYC, but we have no risk of losing its CID. All right? I am thinking in particular of Zengo, in which you have the possibility of doing this. In addition, it is a company that is well established, particularly in France, and which is validated in Europe. So there you have it. There are things like that that exist where you don't have to leave everything on a centralized exchange. Do your best to get out as much as possible on it. So, to be completely honest with you, I have almost nothing left on Binance. I just have BNB because I am exposed to Binance, because I tend to think that Binance remains one of the best exchanges that exist. Currently, I think that on the next bull run, they will continue to perform. The question is, do they have enough liquidity to be able to hold out until then? Have they not done any stupid things with user funds that we have no certainty? And I don't play with uncertainty. I don't deposit my funds in something where I am not sure of what is going to happen. I really leave the union minimum aside. We have the competitor, for example, BIT. So the token, which itself is the Bybit token. Okay, so it's the same, this token there. Personally, I have some never owned, even if it has an appeal, which is interesting because I find that it does not have a structural value. While BNB has a form of effective burning, it is used in the platform, and alongside it feeds the BNB chain, which is still one of the big blockchains of decentralized finance. Although the decentralization of BNB and the BNB chain, we are very, very far from it. You have to be aware of it, but that does not prevent the fact that it is a product which behind it has a useful. That's why. This is the only exchange crypto I currently have in my wallet. Bybit itself and Bybit behind it. Bybit, I find that it is an interface which is excellent. It is for me one of the best exchanges which was available but which is no longer available in France, at least for the French, which will certainly be more available for French people, even if you already have an account. Next to it, we have another competitor which is BitGet, so others call it BitJet. I consider that it is BitGet because we buy and it is get to buy to have Bitcoin, so we are on BitGet. I don't already buy BGB, so who is the token? Because for me, I consider BGB to be a huge Ponzi because there is absolutely nothing behind it, and it's a form of price manipulation because we are encouraged to have BGB to be able to have reductions, and BGB in itself is bought back by BitGet regularly. So for me, it's a token, a fake token, really. On the other hand, the BitGet platform is a very interesting platform, which is KYC now. And my question is, will BitGet don't follow the same path as Bybit, okay? Aren't we going to find ourselves behind closed doors to the French? Are we not going to find ourselves behind? Why not eventually, with a form of obligation to completely close the FR market? And why not market? Belgian afterwards? We know that the Belgians are really not far behind on this. And so we still find ourselves on the three giants. We say to ourselves, well, okay, what choice do I have? Okay, Binance, it's not possible to make futures, and overall it doesn't necessarily smell very good. Bybit, they are in the process of leaving France and generally Europe, and we know that the Binance and Bybit relationship is relatively strong. Both are really very closely related. As Binance was very linked to FTX, we know very well that it is really very close. Then we have BitGet. BitGet, which is a very good platform, which is KYC, therefore which has withdrawn its notion of KYC name, but unfortunately we can have problems with it. Moreover, on Bybit and BitGet, you have in description the links of the tutorial videos if you are interested in watching. Then we have BingX, which is the platform, one of the platforms that I often use, which is non-KYC, and which allows you to really have a very good experience in terms of trading, and which also allows you to have other components other than cryptos in which you can leverage. So it's really interesting. In any case, the same in description, you have a video on it. And I'm currently testing another platform, which is ZoomEX, in which we still have quite a few things. We know that we still have a lot of liquidity and interface, which still looks really similar to Bybit. So we have an experience which is almost similar with something that is relatively solid. I'm currently testing it. I think I'm going to make you a video of the whole thing in a short time. But the question we're going to have to ask ourselves is, already there is an interest in owning tokens from a platform, from a centralized exchange. Personally, I buy BNB not because it is Binance, but mainly because it is the BNB chain. And yes, we has Binance, which is behind and which is burning on it. That's it. That's the whole thing that means that I have BNB. I don't have BIT and I don't have BGB, and I won't have other cryptos trailing other exchanges. There are other exchanges that are interesting. We have Kraken, we have OKX, we will have KuCoin too. But it's the same. We will find ourselves in the same dynamic. At what point will we have exchanges that will be able to be compliant and that will allow derivative products to be made as we wish? It's really very complicated. I admit that it's something that risks being very rare and that we're going to have to fight about it. And that's why I'm afraid that here we're going to have Bybit. Even if you have a Bybit account, there is a good chance that it will be closed by the end of the year, or you will be asked to close it. So be careful about the positions you already have currently. Is it that BitGet is going to be next? For the moment, it's working well. So personally, I'm still using BitGet, but I'm getting ready to look elsewhere. That's also why I have BingX, and I'm looking, there you go, potentially ZoomEX. Try to always have a distribution of my resources on the different exchanges. For what? Because it's the same. if we ever have an FTX like, okay, so we're going to end up with a Binance which is going to sink, at which point we're going to end up with a BTC, or very clearly we are going to sink. So my BTC is here, we are going to take a life a little lower. I think that if we have an endogenous element to the BTC, I think that we return to the 15,000, or even maybe a little lower. Of course we break out the 20,000. We will even look perhaps for the 19,000, perhaps the 15,000. So there we will have an element which will be really very strong. And I can tell you that if we have Binance, there is a good chance that we are Bybit. And if we have Binance, I can tell you that the regulations will not be the same. Here, on the other hand, we can say that there is almost no centralized exchange which will be able at any given moment in one way or another to offer leverage elements or services on a European or US territory. There, on the other hand, it will be Baghdad in terms of regulations. And it could even be a total ban on cryptos in certain places, or at least certain uses. So there it risks being really very complicated. There we are really talking about an endogenous element. It is more than a black swan. It could hurt a lot. Afterwards, it is possible that we have a form of black swan saying, okay, well, there is a risk. There is a fart which takes place, and therefore a huge FUD which is set up on BNB, and therefore behind on Binance, to then manage to restructure. On the rise by saying, well, no, it's fake news, and we start to rise again. Why not two? It's the same. On the other hand, what is certain is that Bybit risks suffering enormously because the two are linked. BitGet. I don't remember that they really have a big position. Close to Binance, Binx no, ZoomX also no, or almost. So for me, it's a distribution issue. If ever I have everything in a single centralized exchange in terms of my trading funds, I'm not talking about my investment funds. My investment funds are moved to wallets in which I necessarily have the keys. Don't forget you have options like Zengo if you don't want to remember the keys. The MPC is made for that. And precisely. I limit, that is to say that I have a part which is on BitGet. I have a part which is on BitGet. And here I am wondering about ZoomX. I am being tested. I think that there will be a part that will be on Zoom too. And I will see, do I keep BitGet and I also keep ZoomX? Or do I move BitGet to ZoomX? Precisely in anticipation of the fact that potentially we will end up with a BitGet that would be mistreated in terms of compliance. To summarize all of this, we will be simple. For me, there is a risk on Binance, that there is a general risk on all centralized exchanges. It is something which is always present. We tend to forget it. I remind you that almost a year ago we had FTX, that it served as a lesson to some but not to all, that Binance remains centralized, that it is impossible to audit, and that there is a risk, is it justified or not, that we are incapable of determining it. And if we are incapable to determine it, we must consider it to be a strong structural risk. So we hedge against it. What happens if there is actually a fall in Binance? I can tell you that BTC will very clearly retest the 15,000 here. Okay? Or even perhaps a little less because we will have a strong impact here in terms of crypto regulation. It's not going to be the same thing. And that could really hurt the start of a bull run, or at least the preparation for a next bull run. Can we have a form of FUD that will take place? I think this is also what is happening. Currently, there is a very strong form of FUD that is taking place at Binance, and this is the time to test whether or not Binance is capable of assuming a bank run or not. Are they able to have liquidity? And that we have already had a first test with FTX in which we had more than 30 billion which were left Binance and they had fully insured, so see if they will be able to insure if we ever have another bank run. And in general, don't forget to leave the union minimum on your centralized exchanges if you do trading. Think about having a two at least two, please. Exchanges in which you have a distribution of your funds. Don't get cheated mainly because of that. And then even in general, if you ever forget an SL and you make a correction, it happens to everyone at some point when you are tired and you burn the account. At least you will still burn part of your capital and not all of your trading capital. It's super important. And if you ever want to see what BitGet Bing X looks like, there are tutorial videos in the description, and we'll see you Monday 7 p.m. for the daily